All right, welcome back to another amazing episode of UAP Studies Podcast. I am Louis Borges. Joining me, as always, my illustrious co-host Jason Gilmet. How are you, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing good. This is a good Sunday. We have a great guest today.
Absolutely, we say that a lot, and it's because it's true a lot.
Yeah.
Our guest today is a very recognizable figure. He spent decades, giving his hard work and blood, sweat, and tears into what he finds to be interesting and what drives him. He is the founding curator of the Joseph Campbell Archives. He's a PhD. He's appeared on very popular television shows such as Ancient Aliens and the Unexplained with William Shatner. So without further ado, we want to extend a very warm welcome to our guest, Jonathan Young.
Louis, Jason, great to be here. I'm very impressed with the list of guests you have had. Listened to the Jacques Vallée episode, and you had a therapist from Colorado, Schlimmer, I think his name was.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Very interesting angles.
Yeah, we're not just a nuts and bolts UFO show, so to speak. This is a phenomenon that covers many, many different areas and specialties, and it seems the more into it you get and the more credible people you speak to, we now are getting into the realm of like consciousness and quantum theory and everything else. And you look at it that, is this something that's new? Not really, because if you compare to the ancient stories, and every ancient civilization has always looked to the heavens for some type of inspiration, and they felt it important enough to create rituals around that and pass that on to future generations. And even to this day, we have a birth ritual, we have a death ritual, there's a marriage ritual. So ceremony is very integral to us. And we wanted to have somebody on who's a psychologist, somebody who might offer a different mental aspect of this, and maybe give our viewers some information they weren't otherwise thinking of. And so like I said, we like to cover the full spectrum.
Well, if you go out, get away from light pollution and go out and look at the night sky, you'll have a religious experience. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I live in a big city with a lot of light, so I see only a little bit of it. But we can see why the myths had to do with sky visitors.
Definitely. So what got you interested in this whole field and wanting to be a psychologist in the first place?
Problems. I went to therapy and it helped. So I said that looks like a cool thing to do. So I trained. But it's very much about unseen worlds. I'm within the schools of thought that are called depth psychology. People think of Freud and Jung. This is the unconscious. Not all psychologists are interested in that, but that's the area that I work in. So it's all about hidden worlds and the influence of things we cannot see. And it's exciting. It's an adventure. I also grew up very religious, fundamentalist. I went to a church-related college, very evangelical background. And that's about the angels and about our connection to the creator and the divine. I've moved on in my life philosophy. My religious and spiritual life, which is still strong, is more interfaith and comparative. And, I've come away from it. But that early influence is very strong. I'm very grateful for it, that there's more to life than what we see. There's more to life than getting through the day. And there are some mysteries worth studying. So there it is. I'm a seeker like you guys, like a lot of people who pay attention to your wonderful series that want to know more. And that's how I got to this. Working with Joseph Campbell came out of my scholarly life as a professor. The graduate institute that I work at in Santa Barbara, the Pacifica Graduate Institute, which is the leading place to study Carl Jung's ideas for clinical use, managed to land the Joseph Campbell papers. Joseph Campbell was a close friend of the graduate program, came and spoke often, and I worked with him when he came and did seminars and things like that. So the archive came to this small university, and because I knew Joseph Campbell, the family selected me. I got to be the curator, work with his widow and others that had been very close to his circle, and the papers and collection artifacts and all are now in Santa Barbara, where I live and where the Graduate Institute is located. And it was a big project. It really had a huge impact on me. But actually, Joseph Campbell himself had already had this influence, which a lot of people will attest to, who studied with him or read his works, saw him on television with Bill Moyers on public broadcasting, which was a very big series for a long time. He studied comparative mythology, which is unusual in an academic career because usually there are specialists. A person will study the Middle East or they'll study a Japanese historical artifacts and things, but he wanted to see what they had in common. And that resonated with my earlier religious background. I could see that all the images that I had studied in Bible college had multiple possible interpretations. I learned that from Joseph Campbell. And I had actually gotten a little sour on religious matters, and he restored that for me. He gave me back a life of spirituality. And I think a lot of people who read his work saw a new way to study life's mysteries, to study the journey, which was a big thing for him, how we would go on an initiatory pattern and go through this process of transformation. So that's my story. The television work came out of my association with Joseph Campbell. The producers of Ancient Alien had done a really terrific 2-hour special on the mythology of Star Wars. I think it was called Star Wars: The Legacy Revealed, and it was the first 3 films. Then they had a number of experts and a number of public figures. I remember they had Tom Brokaw and some interesting people just giving their, Stephen Colbert was on there, just giving their opinion of the big personal effect that Star Wars had on them. And of course, Star Wars is profoundly mythic. When Lucas was putting together the first screenplay, it wasn't quite working. He had the general idea, but he didn't really have a story pattern that worked. And a friend said, have you ever read Joseph Campbell? And he said, well, yeah, in college. Well, go read that again, because he's got this model that might help you with your story. And it did. He copied it directly, step by step. And that is why Star Wars was such a huge success. And he was forever grateful to Joseph Campbell, called him my Yoda. And when we were setting up the collection, the archives, he supported us, was on our board of advisors. I got to meet him. I got to work with. So we had some problems with audio. We had a lot of audio recordings of Joseph Campbell speaking in church halls and not very good quality. And we said, this is valuable material. We want to bring books out from this. But George, we can barely hear it. He says, let my guys work on this. So I was up at Skywalker Ranch, and the audio people there were able to bring pristine quality out of really murky audio. Oh, and wow. A lot of that was released on CD and stuff, and we brought books out of that. So the connection between Joseph Campbell and George Lucas was very strong. And I got to comment on, in fact, they gave me the last word. They actually let me sort of narrate the whole. Because we were following Campbell's stages, and I would articulate how each section of the movie followed that stage of discovery within the hero's journey. And it was a very good program. And then a couple of years later, they got this idea of doing a program about alien visitation with Eric Van Daniken and Giorgio Tsoukalos. And they said, oh, well, get the mythic perspective in here, get Jonathan on that program too. And that was 12 years ago. And there have been I can't keep track of the topics, but they've come at everything from this perspective. It's just fascinating. And nobody expected it to have this kind of run. We thought, interesting History Channel. We didn't know that if the channel would stay interested or the public would stay interested. It grows and grows and grows. In fact, we can put it on a 10-year-old rerun and get a great rating because the fascination with this material is very, very strong.
And when you're doing these sort of productions that goes on, like, are you given that free range to state your opinion, or do they find that they edit that quite a bit within the editing room?
Oh, yes, I say a lot more on the psychological significance than they want. I always say it, and the interviewer, the cameraman, everything. Oh, there he goes again. And now and then, some little bit of what I say will catch their interest, and they'll put it in. But they're mostly interested in the details of ancient civilization. And frankly, I have to look that all up. I'm not really a historian, I'm a psychologist, but I understand it. And I understand it from working with Campbell, the significance and how ritual opens doors to invisible dimensions and things like that. I have the general idea, and I study up on the particular topic at hand. And I could tell they like it because they put me on the screen a fair amount. There's quite a few of us, and we know each other. Because they put on these conventions, Alien Con, great fun. And then we hang out then and can compare notes. I go to some of the others. There's one called Contact in the Desert,
yes,
here in California. And it is fascinating to compare notes with people, experiencers. I'm not an experiencer, but I talk to them. And I have a clinical practice as a psychologist. And some people come to work with me because of the program. They know I will have respect for their experience. And they've seen things, they've had contact over years and things. And I do have respect. I think these are profoundly important moments.
I've heard you mention on other shows that you're one of the only guy on the show that's somewhat of a skeptic when it comes to the whole alien theory. You prefer to look at it more in terms of angels or some other type of maybe misunderstood phenomenon. So give us your perspective on, with ancient aliens being the topic, ancient civilizations, the artifacts they've left behind, the importance that they put on those areas, even so much so that if there was two nations at war, they wouldn't simply, destroy the landmark and move on. They would usually rebuild their own. So, what are your thoughts on the whole ancient mysticism of the world and how that kind of relates to the topic of ufology?
Well, secularism is a fairly new idea. You go back 1,000 years, everybody's a believer. Now, you believe some slightly different stories in Japan versus France, but the sense of the sacred and the sense of visitation, that we're dealing with entities beyond our own skin, that's a given. So the idea that it might not be, that's in human history, that's a relatively new idea. Now, I do think there's some kind of contact going on. The debate is, what is it? We are in touch with something beyond our understanding. Now, it could be angels. It could be visitors from the future. Some people think it's government conspiracy that think there are people that do know what's going on. They're just not telling us. I personally don't go down that road. So we have debates when we get together at these conventions. I remember one, Eric Von Däniken was on the platform, and the topic was Atlantis. And I said, Atlantis is important. It could represent a place in the heart that is our highest yearning for something better. And I'm going on very poetically. And Eric Von Däniken says, it's not a place in the heart, it's an actual place. And I said, Eric, it could be both at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's where I go. Fascinated with it, think it's important. I checked out pretty early on spam in the can. I do not think a spacecraft is coming from another galaxy to visit us. There might be other ways to travel through time and space. So, okay, that's in broad terms. We'll follow that thread throughout our conversation, because I've got a lot to say on what it might be. My own speculations. The Greeks had a language for it. In Plato, there's the idea of the daimonic, daimon, daimon. This is not exactly an angel, but it's more like an angel than like something human. It is an in-between character, energy, identity, personality. So in between, a kind of a go-between. And between what? Between the human and the sacred, between us and the gods. There are couriers. And you go through different cultures, and they have different names. If you are in the Middle East, the jinn, or what we call genie.
Yeah.
This is, okay, we're in touch with something that's beyond human, but it's not a god, it's something else. It's another category. I think visitors, UAP, ET, all this falls in this category. And you have different variations on artists. When they say, I'm stuck in my novel, I'm not getting on with my muses right now. They're not giving me anything. They have a whole vocabulary of dealing with something beyond themselves. They don't usually talk about, Jesus didn't give me a page yesterday. They don't blame it on the gods, but they focus on the connection. How do I connect with something beyond my understanding? So I think this entire UAP conversation is in that intermediate realm, and it is mystical and confusing. It will do things that don't make sense in terms of physics. Well, it's not really bound by physics. It's really in some dimension of its own. So that's my angle.
I think it adds complexity to those big questions, like who am I? Why am I here? What does this all mean? Where am I going? And then you throw in ancient stories of visitors and craft and even current ones. It definitely makes it a lot harder to palate, right? And to really try to get your teeth into.
Well, or you can think of it as abundance. You got a lot to
Yeah.
draw on.
Yeah.
Some of my clients have had visitation, profound visitation over a period of years, often unusual forms, kind of a silvery, kind of like somebody's wearing silver lame, but they're not. It's their actual color and things like that. And mostly very positive, kind of like a vision of the Holy Mother or something that religious people talk about, where there's a real blessing that this thing happened. And they are not sure whether it was a thing that really happened or a dream. And my point is, hey, a dream is a thing that really happens. And it's clearly from beyond yourself. This is like a middle-aged woman tells me that this young male figure in shiny silver visits her often. I'm thinking you're a lucky seeker. That's a blessing. That's a fabulous thing. What do you get out of it? And let's not debate whether it's real or not. Let's go with it. Something good is happening.
There's two scenarios when it comes down to alien abduction. It's either good or it's a negative one. It's either they come here to talk or they come here to do something physically, medically to the entity. What I mention a lot is, having talked to people that have been abducted, is that every single time they're on the ship, there is a room specifically designed for a human to lay down on, and medical devices to come out of the walls and stuff like that to do experiments on people. And so that's a common thread, is that most of these ships have these things for, medical exams for us. Has that been something that has been throughout history, as far as like, medical exams on people, or is it mostly just a positive, experience with entities of somewhere else?
They're not all positive. The abduction scenario goes all the way back.
Right.
It was a very big thing when Europeans came to the Americas. The natives would abduct people. Now, a few of them actually happened, but the game of telephone, where these stories would travel over to another area, and a person, you could even tell there might be a scrap of language from one area that couldn't have happened over here, because that language is from way over there.
Right.
So clearly it's the story that traveled. But it's a fascination when encountering something mysterious. We have this fantasy of abduction.
Right.
So I'm a psychologist. I'm thinking, oh, well, clearly contact with something we do not understand frightens us. So we fear harm. Now, I warned you that my interest, one of my big interests is in sci-fi movies, is the films about UAP, because I think they depict our various fantasies. And so we have the dominating, invading, torturing kind of monster movies, horror movies, like the Alien series, the Aliens and all those. And then we have the kindly visitor, helpful, almost fairy godmother stories like E.T. and other sort of stories for young people and things like that. Well, they reflect our range of emotional reactions to mystery. Is it going to hurt me, or is it going to help me? And sometimes in one of the good stories, there's a shift, and we realize, oh, well, they were going to hurt us when we rolled out all the guns and threatened to blow up their spacecraft. But once we stand down, actually, they just want to chat. So we realize in the screenplay, and this is a fairly common trope in sci-fi films, it's all about how we manage our own fears.
Right. And we also are afraid of, like, similarities to what happened with Cortez and, the Incas and stuff like that. Just afraid that there's going to be a takeover at some point. So it reflects a lot of our own human fears and own human natures as well. We project that upon, if there's an alien entity, if it's a ghost, it's always meaning harm, in the sense of, like, wanting to make contact, but at the same time with its own intent. And
Yeah.
I find that a theme that reoccurs a lot within Hollywood movies. It's always our own behaviors that we project upon aliens, right?
And let me just pick up on the reference to Cortez. Most of the people in the discussion are part of Cortez's tribe. That is our own aggression that we're afraid of. Yeah,
Right.
If we had all the power and could fool the natives, what would we do? Would we torture them, take slaves, and grab all their gold? That's what our ancestors did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I'm afraid of for space exploration with humans. If we come across, a lesser species than us, are we going to be as equally compassionate towards them as some of these abductees have said that these entities are really compassionate? We mention it many times. Whenever they take somebody, they don't launch them out of the airlocks and say, well, we don't need that anymore. They replace people. And from what I understand from some of these abductions, they're even tucked back into bed, which to me shows compassion, shows some sort of level of love, or at least wanting to take care of it, right?
I just tend to be an optimist. My guess is something good will come of this. It is always scary to encounter something really strange, and this is really, we need to underscore again and again, this is beyond our understanding. We're in a Matrix-like situation here,
Right.
like the film series Matrix. What we're dealing with is so far beyond our grasp. And the other one that I like is more recent is Arrival. That the
Yes.
language system they're using. Well, I mean, the movie was unrealistic because one of us, now a genius professor, but still one of us actually figures out a way to communicate. The likelihood of that is really small. It's a movie, so it's, we needed to accomplish that in 2 hours. But boy, if we get formal contact that we're able to engage in a collective way, not just the isolated visits, but really get into the conversation, it's going to be a job to figure out how to communicate.
And speaking of that technology difference, like, what do you think about some of these ancient ruins? Do you think that they were us in the past and we just lost some of that technology or the skill of how to do it? Or do you believe, like the Sphinx or the Great Pyramids doesn't seem to line up with the type of tools they had at the time? And I mean, people have explained, yeah, you could use rollers and this and that. But if you look at some of the other ruins around the world, like Baalbek or whatever, they have many, many, stones that are way larger than anything, even in Egypt, hundreds of tons. So, like, what are your thoughts? Do you think that's us?
I'm stumped by Baalbek. I've been there, and some of those stone slabs are just enormous.
Insane.
We would have a very hard time moving them now.
And they didn't put them on the ground. They put them in the middle of the structure.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go for easy, you'd build with bricks like we do nowadays. Why do you need monolithic stones that are 600 tons?
That said, there's something in science and intellectual history called nowism, where we assume that what we do now is the pinnacle. There are a lot of aspects to it. The ancient Egyptians had good math, and they had time. The entire culture, everyone in the place was totally devoted. We say it was done by slaves. No, they were willing volunteers.
Yeah.
They wanted to do this for religious reasons. They were willing to take their off time, and being agricultural, there were blocks of off time, and they would come and work voluntarily and make a small dent in this huge project. Well, if you can mobilize everyone and the entire resources of a really brilliant and rich civilization, you can do stuff. You can do amazing stuff. So I think it's a little disrespectful to our ancestors to say, well, they couldn't have done this without computers. Well, with patience, I actually think they could have.
Yeah, and brilliant people, because I mean, at the time it was facing true north when the north was there. I mean, obviously the what is it? The pole is moving or something like that. The electrical magnet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pointing true north. I mean, that dedication to be able to say every brick was measured to make sure that it was accurate. That is dedication. And even we were talking with Louis not that long ago, we were mentioning how people didn't live that long back in the days. I mean, like 24 was the average lifespan for people.
Yeah.
So to devote a big chunk of your life towards something like that, that shows great dedication. And yeah, still no proof that it was slaves or anything like that built them. It shows compassion and wanting to make a great monument, right? So yeah, you're right.
Well, what is our God? What we do with our best life, and what we do is try to survive. We need food, we need shelter, we need, we once you manage that, what do you do with the rest? Well, you devote it to your art or your beliefs or your God. And there was no debate then. There was one great cause. Everybody was on board. It was an awesome thing. That said, there are still huge mysteries. Well, even from my position, which is a bit of a discounting of some of the ideas, still we are wondering how they did it, and a lot is lost. This is an interesting aspect of intellectual history: is how much gets lost, how
Right.
much advances. The progress is not linear. It's not one step up a ladder after another. A lot of stepping off to the side, a lot of totally losing a good idea because it became politically incorrect somehow, or somebody else was a better salesman, so they sold some bunk that was a bad idea, but we followed it for a few hundred years, and then we realized, wait a second, this doesn't work. What was that other idea we used to have? We're very sloppy, and
Right.
and this is what's fascinating in history, is to go back looking for lost treasures, because there are a lot of them.
And even from an organic level, certain things just don't age well. Like you can't really carbon date stone. If you're looking for pottery around the Sphinx, well, if it's, 5 or 10,000 years older than most scholars think it is, the likelihood of finding anything is slim to none. Eventually everything turns back into dust, and it doesn't always leave that historical signature. So to get correct information, or for someone to say, no, the Sphinx is definitely this many years old, you don't know. And I think it was Robert Schoch that said that it looks like water erosion around the feet, not wind damage. And if it's water erosion, it's way older than they ever thought. So
Yeah, yeah.
the more scientific we get and the better instrumentation we have, we can do better quantitative testing. And it's like, whoa, this is even crazier than we initially thought.
Now, also in these artifacts are all kinds of carvings and evidence that there were visitations, that the
Yes.
gods came and were among them. Well, now what's that all about? And that we get into that in the Ancient Aliens TV program often. This idea that different cultures had visitations, often from the skies, sometimes in craft of some kind. Maybe they depicted it in some place, something culturally appropriate. So you have a flying chariot or something that they could understand. But basically, they're dealing with something they have a hard time grasping. Okay, sentient beings of some kind, advanced intelligence, comes up from the sky and interacts with us, often leaving some kind of blessing. Now and then they're sort of terrifying, dragon figures or something, but more often than not, okay, whatever that is, we want it. we want to study that, to see anything we can do to facilitate that we're interested in, and try to get past our religious prejudices, that if it's never been mentioned in our Bible, therefore it can't be possible. Hell with that. I want to look at everybody's Bible, everybody's scripture and tradition.
Yeah.
Anything that's happened, let's be open.
There's so many similarities if you look at religions globally. Like whether you're a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, the list goes on and on. To be good to your edicts and to your philosophies, you have to maintain that same level of character. No religion says murder is okay, or theft, or committing adultery, or worshiping idols and that type of thing. They all seem to have the same basic tenets. If you're a good person, then you're good to whatever religion you happen to believe in. And it's almost like there were many messengers to reach all the different areas of the globe, but fundamentally they all say the same thing.
Well, there's great common grounds. There are some differences that are worth studying. Differences in ritual, which is really kind of a spiritual technology, a way to open doors to greater consciousness. And Western mysticism has developed some fascinating things. That Saint Teresa of Avila has. I kind of guided imagery, a way to go into unseen worlds. She called it interior castle. But there are techniques in Asia that we really never did stumble upon. So this is where comparative studies are really worth our time.
And we were talking about wars as well earlier, saying how wars, usually when there's an invasion from another country and they're there for quite some time, tend to dissolve and destroy the old traditions or oral histories of the people that are live there. I'm thinking about the French and the English, how the French really shaped the English language now and destroyed a lot of the English history. That's what we were talking about earlier, how it's very easy to lose stuff from our past when there's constantly war. We destroy everything. There's looting, like Louis was mentioning earlier. People come and loot old artifacts and sell them, so we lose a lot of the history from our past.
Yeah,
How much does
the Taliban blew up some ancient Buddhist statues because they're, well, Buddhism is wrong because with their Islam. So yeah, the brutal tendency does smash, particularly imagery. There's a great fear. During the Inquisition, there was a smashing of a lot of statues. They called it idolatry. But imagery is a depiction of the imagination.
right?
And that tends to scare the high priests and the very, very reactionary faithful, because it has a kind of autonomy. The imagination doesn't always attend religious school. It sort of goes in its own directions. It's lively, and that kind of scares people who like rules and order and guilt. So there's always been this tension in pretty much every religious tradition. And now and then you'll have an upheaval, and a lot of valuable images are lost.
You see that in ancient Egyptian culture, where I think it was Akhenaten, and he's like scrubbed from almost every single hieroglyph he was ever in, either by his predecessor or whatever. But there's been certain people that have been noticeably removed from history, and not just the name, but like you said, their likeness, that visual, which will always give you that same answer in the imagination. If you're an enigma and if it's just a name, people kind of draw their own conclusion. But if it's a picture and a likeness, that seems to be a lot more intimidating to somebody that's trying to make you go away.
So we go in with the scraps of broken things. We try to piece together sections that were missing, sometimes missing intentionally. And that's a particularly interesting story. What the Pharaoh probably, the error is not only moved something toward a new religion, but that pulled power away from a very strong priestly caste.
Yeah.
And he didn't live that long. So as soon as he's gone, the old guard pulls back in, smashes all his images, and restores the ancient wisdom. But really it's the wisdom that gave power to them, which is the topic of the play between religion and power. And religion as inspiration, as vision, is very valuable and useful. Religion as oppressive power is really suspicious. And that comes back to what we were talking about earlier about, are these visitations kindly or not? Well, if you imagine they're trying to control us, that's not so friendly. If they've come to inspire us, it is. And how much of that is projection of our own control problems versus our own more kindly visions?
Yeah, before the people that were the scholars or the shaman, they were the only literate people in the culture. So the heads of church and state were the only people that were giving you the news. And as somebody who doesn't know any better, it was very easy to use that for not so nice purposes. If you wanted to control people through fear of God's wrath, hey, you're also the official representative of deity, and you can easily get that message across.
Power corrupts. And there's a lot of power if you come and finagle a way to say you're speaking for God. Yeah, I mentioned growing up fundamentalist evangelical. I'm fascinated with all the scandals, and I still watch the TV evangelists. First of all, they put on a good show, and I love the music. But and then it's just a matter of time. I mean, the most recent was the president of Liberty University, Jerry Falwell Jr. And the fall from grace. It's Greek tragedy. Here is somebody in a very influential position. I mean, doing something that he cares about and messes up with, tawdry sexual escapades and things. You say, well, you get a big head. It's called grandiosity or narcissism, and you don't think straight. And one of the ways to look at it is that you have muddled the line between what is reasonable human activity and what really should belong to the gods. And that is the way the ancient Greeks and many other traditions saw it, that we need to be very careful when dealing with large ideas, that we don't get too self-important as if it's about me. Yeah. Representing a religion is never about the preacher. It's about the God. It's about the teachings, the ethics, all of that. And it gets scrambled often.
If you fly too close to the sun, you'll melt your wings. If you try to be too godly, you're very quickly pointed out to be just another sinning human being, right? And the guys like Jimmy Swaggart and the Bakers and all the other televangelists that have kind of fallen from grace. But when we do the same thing with celebrities too, right? We want to pump them up and put them on that podium. And as soon as they're up there, we want to shoot them off. So maybe that's just something within the human condition that we're just prone to doing this.
One of my day jobs is teaching professional ethics for mental health, psychologists and the like. And it's not that powerful position. It's not like being a general or an extremely wealthy person, but in the life of that one patient at that one moment, there is a fair amount of influence. And it's terribly important that the professional, the doctor, stays very humble and represents a tradition. And all the research is not that the doctor is so damn brilliant. It's that somebody did some studies that he or she got to read, and that it comes out their mouth because they're in the job right then. Celebrities are not gods. They're just good actors, singers, dancers, whatever. But we're kind of short of gods these days in culture. So they get elevated a little beyond what is good for the human soul. Virtually every religion has a teaching about humility. The Quakers were particularly good at it, but the Zen is good at it too. And why is that necessary? Because if you're interested in the gods, you'll lose your balance. You'll get carried away with it. And you need a little mechanism, ritual activity that will bring you back to earth. Chop wood, carry water. In my life, it's clean out the cat box. You know, if you get a little too full of yourself, the stink of the cat box will bring me right back down to the instinctual level.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of ritual,
bulldog.
Speaking of ritual getting you to zero, that's basically the ethos of the Buddhist religion. You know, going through that everyday ritualistic, trying to attain that nirvana similar to Buddha, you know, and you take in other aspects of it, like maybe fasting or depriving yourself of certain things, meditating. You're trying to just quiet the mind and get to that zero. So it's not like that's our default setting. We have to do work to get to that. You know, it's an application of a ritual and a process that has come from before you.
And we're capable of losing our footing. We're capable of getting off track. It's terribly important to remember that. Especially, we're talking large ideas here. We're talking about UAP. We're talking about visions and visitations, big stuff. Well, you can get a little wacky. You need to really be sober about what did I actually see? How much do I really know? Let me not embroider the story. Let me try to keep simple, keep in my humanity here.
Right. It's, and I often mention that about the alien abduction, it's either that it's a new mental illness that is out there that's rampant. It's either a lie that everybody's contributing to, or it's actually happening.
Okay, let me take that one on.
Sure.
That's polarizing thinking.
Okay.
Something is either this or that. And in my seldom humble opinion, it is very rarely that simple. Okay. Almost everything is some mingling, like my argument with Von Daniken. It can be both things at the same time. And then it gets much more complicated. And then once you put it that way, it's a lot more work.
Okay, so I'm stating an absolute when I shouldn't be, right?
Right. That's the problem with that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's usually put forward by somebody who's enthusiastic and wants to argue that it's true. I would rather, to use an old legal term, I would like to stipulate. Let's agree that something's true, something big is happening, and not debate that point.
Like that.
And get into the mud, which is, what the heck is it? What do we got here? And my sad report is, I think we might have several things happening at the same time. And first of all, interested in older cultures, these are the leprechauns. These are the menehune in Hawaii. These are the devas. The little people have been with us for a lot longer than flying saucer stories or anything from the skies. What the heck? And we get into that a little bit in the Ancient Aliens television programs and things. There are all these stories. I'm particularly interested in genie and the jinn, these intermediate characters in the Middle Eastern traditions, who sometimes could be dangerous. You had to treat them right. They were powerful, but they could do things for you. And we have, I love jokes, and there's lots of jokes about somebody who finds a lamp and dusts it off, and a genie comes out. And then you have the quandary, and they're funny because in the joke you always mess it up. You don't answer you don't use the three questions wisely, because they're little moral tales about not getting too greedy because it's going to mess you up.
Right.
And not to fully trust those things either. The genie might seem like he's your friend, but he could be leading you down a path of what you think is good for you, and then be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the movie Bedazzled. If you guys ever seen that with Brendan Fraser. He keeps wishing for different wishes, and the
I,
wishes are
yeah,
always screwed up.
yeah,
I think so, yeah.
he becomes a narco trafficker one time, but he can speak Spanish. He
Yeah,
can't speak English anymore.
he wanted to be rich and powerful, so she made him this Colombian drug lord with like
Yeah,
this massive nose that does cocaine. It's
right,
pretty
right.
funny. I recommend that movie for sure.
But the cliche, careful what you wish for.
That's right.
But so as we go into these topics, I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, but it's powerful stuff. I don't think it's insanity. I go to these conferences. I look around. They contact in the desert or Alien Con or these various things. They don't seem like crazy people to me, and I'm a professional in this field. It seems like an average bunch of, if you walk down the main street of your town, that's who's there. Regular
Yeah.
people. Who have maybe seen something, or a lot of them are just fascinated, or the wife has seen something, but I'm coming along because it's pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, we yearn for something beyond ordinary understanding. We yearn for transcendence. It's what draws people to religion. It's also what draws people to dangerous sports, to try to push the edge a little bit.
Is it possible that ufology can become a religion? That it
I
becomes
think
a
I think it is a religion. Yeah,
yeah.
and within scholarly circles, there's an area called new religious traditions, and it essentially, in a new religion, there are no gods. There are new realities,
Okay.
because a god already is calling it religious, and actually it takes a while before a religion realizes it is one. It's just new reports of something. Joseph Campbell thought that the first religious impulse was probably in Siberia, because we can see how the stories seem to migrate westward. So it's probably in Siberia, in the what we call the shamanistic tradition. Some medicine man, some Siberian shaman with his beard and his furs, comes out of his cave and tells a story of some wondrous contact. Well, he probably had a dream. We don't know, because he didn't call it a dream, because people didn't think of dreams as something different from it. It just, this happened. Well, yeah, it was. Oh, yeah, it was during the dark hours. And then this other thing happened, and he tells a hunting story, and it doesn't discriminate one from the other as being more real. They're both real stories, but the one that happened in the night hours, the dark hours, had something come down from the sky, a flying caribou or something like that. So we have these reports, and they're just true. And then later, maybe our neighbor says, well, that's you're talking about your God. And then it gets that kind of language to it. So something new is happening, some new image of the extraordinary. And what's interesting about UAP is that it tends to weave in modern technology. The other religions around here, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Zen, the various things we have to choose from, tend to have an oldish quality. The stories have people in old-fashioned clothing and stuff like that, so it gets a little dusty. Well, let's heck with that. We'll have technology, not only technology that's up to speed with what we actually have, but beyond that. It's technology beyond what we know.
Right.
Okay, that gets a whole modern thing, so that seems more real for now. So yeah, I do think that the whole UAP is a new religion, and since I think religion is a positive event in human history, that's a good thing.
Okay.
It's a means to explain the unexplained. And I think that's what religion, its primary function is. Again, how do you answer those big questions of life? You create a system that you can tell stories, symbolism, all the rest. And by going through that initiative right, eventually you get sort of a bit of an understanding of things as well as we know it, but it also kind of caters to the brain wanting to compartmentalize everything and make sense of everything and not have any or too many unknowns. We don't like to know that we don't know.
It's a paradox, because religion does explain a lot. That helps. It also has a whole system for acknowledging there is a body of information beyond our grasp, whether it's about God and heaven and life and death and afterlife and all that, but we do not understand. Now, we have our little theories, but we know they're just our little guesses, that whatever it really is more than that. I come back to the Matrix movies. Whatever this other thing is, it's really different, and it's way more than I guessed. In fact, a lot of my guesses are wrong. And so there's this humbling quality of coming back to the altar, back to prayer, back to our studies, back to our research. Okay, let's assume we don't get it. How could this be wildly different than all of our guesses up to this point? And that's the advancement of science, advancement of knowledge, but that's also a very spiritual stance to be in.
With our advancement in science and technologies, do you think that kills the religious aspect of ourselves? Like, does it make us not depend so much on the gods? Because basically we become the gods of the past, right? We can cure diseases, we can help blind, we can help the deaf hear. Like, we've become almost what we used to worship. Is that change in the Western world because of technology? Are we less prone to religious? And now, because of that, we have ufology that kicked in, and now we're sort of stuck on this alien or entities from other dimensions because it's technologically more advanced and it fits more the narrative that we're at right now.
Well, there's a shift in language. So we're using more technical language. I think religion is very hearty and will find a way to reformulate itself because we need it.
Okay.
Because we need, well, both sides that Louis and I were just discussing, both some explanations and some acknowledgement of mystery. We need both sides of that, and we'll find a way to do that. I do think that it's a difficult transition because a lot of people kind of like the old way we did it. It's comforting, it's familiar. It's the way I learned when I was 3 and 4 and 5. So therefore it has a kind of patina of truth just for having on a personal level been around and just historically been around for a long time. In the sociology of religion, they talk about how religious authority grows. It grows through a time machine. That is, somebody tells a story and says, yeah, I think God might have a long beard. And then their children says, God has a long beard. And then their children says, God has a long beard. How do you know? Oh, it is just true. It's true. But actually, it was just great grandfather's guess.
Right.
And the guess part gets lost in time. And it gets more and more concrete. Well, it gets more and more certain to the point where it's smug. It's like, our God is a white guy in white robes with a white beard, and that's that. And your God isn't true because he doesn't look like that. Well, are you sure? Oh, absolutely. It's always been so. It's the absolute truth. But these people, they're wrong. They're all going to go to hell or something because they've got, this. We have to have a revolution from time to time and clear out some of this dust. And try to come back stupid, so innocent, open, receptive to maybe another way of looking at it. And frankly, all of our interpretations are guesswork based on our own culture, based on some familiar image that we are applying to something new. The gods are probably not going to look at all like human beings. I come back to the film Arrival. They're probably going to be, what was it, heptapods or something, looking like weird
squid.
Octopi or squid or something. Yeah. And that's just a movie guess, but at least it's weird. And okay, we're not going to understand them, and they're going to use an atmosphere we can't use, and we're okay. There, get humble again. Start from scratch.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's dangerous anytime man tries to speak for God, especially a lot of scripture was written hundreds of years after the person in the story. So it's almost like organized religion and the politics therein kind of give God, God, a bad name. It's, again, you get that depiction of a white man with a beard throwing lightning bolts at people, condemning them, who yet are his creatures that he supposedly loved and created and knows nothing about, negativity or evil or whatever. So I think the story of God we've written makes his work perplexing. He's either the one and omnipotent and cannot be defined, or it isn't. And I think the more that we get stuck on the dots and the I's and the T's and the paper, we're missing the forest because there's too many trees in the way,
Oh, the lightning bolt, that part is particularly cool though. We
It is
actually,
cool, yeah.
we do trip out on that on the Ancient Aliens sometimes, that even in these rather dusty stories, there are clues to possible technology. That could have been a missile or a rocket ship or a spacecraft of some kind. And we see these possibilities, and you can see how people of limited technology would interpret it in their way. They knew about lightning. They've seen that. So, okay, this thing, this flash is lightning. Yeah. So
And some of them, it's not that much of a stretch. Like if you look at the Vedas and the ancient East Indian texts, they're like, they drew pictures of people in craft flying around. So some Asian cultures, they drew a dragon because it was a fire breathing flying snake thing. The only thing their brains could really wrap around was maybe that's a dragon. But in
yeah,
some other ancient cultures, it's a lot more specific. Like it was
right.
working craft with creatures or people inside having a war in the sky, shooting
Yeah,
missiles, lasers.
with propulsion that sure looks a lot like
Yeah,
jet or rocket. Yeah, the Vimanas is what they were called.
yeah,
The
Vimanas, yeah.
yeah the dragons are a symbol for renewal. The snakes, because any snake creature sheds its skin, and a dragon is a mythologized snake that also flies. So we have the bridging of the earth. Actually, the most of the Japanese snake gods start out as water gods. So they're water dragons, sea dragons, and you'll see the location of Japan surrounded by ocean. So a lot of their mythology comes up out of the sea. But you have a bridging of the unseen below, and then Middle Earth, where we can see what's going on, and then the mysteries above. You have a system going on there. But I'm very interested in the renewal theme, and that is one thing that religion tends to do for us culturally and individually, is give us the prospect of redemption, the prospect of restoration, transformation into something new. Something learning is actually hard, and human progress is wrenching. People get hurt, idols get smashed, certainties get questioned, and this is going on. So if we have an emerging religion, which is my opinion, how would we be wise about this set of tenets, this set of ideas, these stories? Well, one thing is try to learn from the errors of the past and not get smug. Not get, I know the answer. This is X, Y, and Z. It's not A, B, and C. That one over there is wrong. We don't know. We don't know very much about this. Is very much in the emerging. Well, we can have our arguments about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, and whether the little green creatures mean us well or harm. But we're just guessing like crazy. We're in way over our heads here, which is what part of the thrill.
And it's interesting because we only had really about 75 years now since Roswell happened, and it's sort of new for us too. We're still figuring out what this whole thing is. But what's interesting is that it's now moved over to Congress. Now Congress is now interested in UAPs. We got the government, military. So this is quite interesting in a sense, because it's not just, maybe an idealism that's forming within ufology, but you also have the military looking into it, the government looking into it. Is that similar to what happened in the past when religion used to seep into the government? Like, do you think there's a similarity there?
Yeah, I'm smiling because it was a little bit of a lefty in college. I don't have a lot of respect for how the government does things. And people that come along and say, well, this whole thing it's a conspiracy to keep this quiet from us. And I'm thinking, our government is keeping this thing, that bunch of Keystone cops, they're keeping this big secret. I don't think so. I just don't think they do that good. I don't have that much respect for their work.
Yeah.
Once in a while they pull something good off. They got us to the moon, but yeah, it is kind of interesting that it's getting a little bit of respect, and that in intellectual history, there's a model that, first of all, oh no, what this new idea, complete nonsense. You guys are stupid or crazy. No way. And then more evidence is presented, and now you're completely raving mad. And then more evidence is presented, and then the third stage is, oh yeah, of course, we always said that.
Yeah, it's always been like that.
It's always, and we said it first. I mean, all of a sudden there's a pivot moment when, instead of it being foolishness, it's common knowledge. Oh, Corey, you're just talking about what everybody knows.
Right.
Well, but yesterday you called us crazy. What? I don't remember that.
Yeah. How can they admit that they've had this info all along and have ruined people's careers and all the rest? They're just going to let disclosure kind of happen and then go along the train with everybody else. Like, oh yeah, we always knew too. Or be just as surprised as everyone else. Wow, we didn't see that coming. They have to save face somehow because of the implication behind what it would mean if they really did know and didn't say anything. We wouldn't trust them ever again.
That's right. Yeah, a wily crew, if you ever found one. I like the theory that some people who know more about all this are carefully sneaking out information in the form of highly speculative movies.
Yeah.
And so the real information is in the movies. I'm smiling because I don't think that literally. I do think that in a kind of psychological sense, that it's not just that the government are unwilling to admit things, it's that the culture is not quite ready for it. We're getting ready. It's rolling out. It's beginning to be acknowledged. And what I'm referring to isn't specifically UAP. It's that there's more than we know. It's more than Western civilization has acknowledged. There are a whole bunch of loose ends, and we need to get humble and start studying some things that we put off the table way too long. So it's interesting the way we carefully proceed. First of all, the artists get a hold of it. And our great artists now are the well-paid artists, the makers of movies, because the money is there. And so like the Medici, what would have been romantic poets in another era, they're screenwriters today. And they tend, and Joseph Campbell noted that the artists are like the canaries in mines. They're more sensitive than others. They will be aware of things that others would miss, and it will get into their poetry and their painting and their movies. It will roll out in fictional form before the culture can handle it in scientific reports. So keep watching the movies.
And your shows and the shows that you're on. Yeah, they're educative.
Where can people follow you or get more information on you and your career and what you've gotten to
Yeah,
go?
it's the kind of things I've written about. I post virtually all of my articles on my website, which is folkstory.com, or just Google my name, Jonathan Young, and Ancient Aliens or something, and you'll get to it. But folkstory.com, and I've got links to some free lectures and things on YouTube and that kind of thing. The ideas I'm mainly interested are how movies are leading our culture to new possibilities. Psychologically, I think we have this powerful visual form of communication that is doing more than just entertain us. I think it is enlightening us, not intentionally, although actually when they made 2001, the filmmakers very intentionally brought some very advanced philosophical ideas, and they told the studio, oh, it's kind of a space adventure, it'll sell a lot of tickets. And so they said they unintentionally made a profoundly religious movie for a huge budget, which did very well. But the filmmakers were being tricksters. They were purposely sneaking in ideas that the studio, if they knew what they were doing, would not have put that kind of money into. And it had a profound effect on our sense of ourselves, because while we're discovering otherness and other kind, whether they are little green or tall silver or heptapods, we're discovering our own limits. We're discovering our own vulnerability. We're discovering a lot about our yearning to know something that is just beyond ordinary thinking. So this is a mirror, a psychological mirror to humanity. The whole UAP UFO thing is about us going through a huge change. It actually goes back a little before Roswell. There were 1890s. There were some dirigible-like sightings and things. And then, as in the show, we can go back much earlier and say, yeah, well, what about this 3,000 years ago? We've got a little clue here. But in the modern era, it really in the 1800s, things started and then picked up speed in the 40s. Something new, or at least a new form of enlightenment from above is happening.
Or like rediscovery, or rediscovering something that we've lost, right?
That's a very good point. Yeah, that we do lose so much that usually when something is new, it's actually something we didn't follow up on long ago. That's a good point.
Perfect. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us on UAP Studies. We had a blast. We hope you can come back and have another go at this, because I think we can talk for hours on this subject for sure.
Great fun. You guys are doing a great work. Keep up the show.